hi. Let's continue the eyeshadow palette tag and go back and do the first one that I never did. I don't know actually why I didn't do it. I think I just didn't have enough time, or there were other things that I had planned to film, or maybe it just came out at a time when I wasn't really filming much. I don't know. Either way, here we go. We're gonna do the eyeshadow palette tag number 1. At this point, the second one will probably already be up. First is my newest palette in my collection, and that is the Nomad Cosmetics Whistler Snow Lodge palette. I just got this yesterday in the mail, and I am wearing it on my eyes today. I am doing a 3 looks 1 palette video review with this palette. So far, I really like it. Spoilers, this is the first look. This is what the palette looks like. It's super pretty. I got it because I'm from Vancouver, so I felt a little bit obligated, but it's also just really pretty. I love the looks that I've seen other creators make with this palette, so I felt like it's a pretty good addition to my collection. And it's just really pretty. I liked it. This is my newest palette in my collection. The oldest palette in my collection, however, is the Colourpop Designer Princess collection. It's a princess thing. It's just a really pretty neutral palette. Like, there's pops of pinks and purples and silver and gold in here, but for the most part, it is a pretty neutral palette, and it's a fantastic neutral palette in my opinion. There's a lot of these, like these 3 neutral shades up here. I know Judy talks a lot about them. They really are just phenomenal. Yeah, this palette is super, super cute, and I'm a sucker for anything Disney princess, so I, like, deep in my heart, I hope that Colourpop comes out with more of these designer Disney princess collections. We've had 2 so far. I think we need another one, so come on, Colourpop, get it together. My most expensive palettes, there's 2. This is the Mcgrath Mothership palettes. I have Bronze Seduction and Midnight Sun. They're stunning. They're phenomenal. I do not regret getting these because they are so beautiful. These eyeshadows blend like a dream. The shimmers in these palettes are just out of this world exciting and beautiful. And you can still get really wearable looks out of these too. So I think that they are incredibly special, but very expensive. Very, very, very expensive. For those who don't know, they retail for 170 Canadian dollars. Though the website does often have sales, so I would not buy these not brand new, but I wouldn't buy these at full price because the Pat McGrath website does very often have sales of like up to 35, sometimes 50% off. So most expensive, but I did get them on sale. The most affordable are the Colourpop 9-pan palettes. I have 3 here to show you. This is Nude Mood. New Nudes is the Huda Beauty. I get them mixed up all the time. Nude Mood, Making Mauves, and That's Taupe. So any of these like standard 9-pan palettes that are not like collab palettes from Colourpop are my most affordable, and I have quite a few of them. They are amazing. I love them. They perform very well. Some of my most unique shimmers come from these palettes. So yeah, really good bang for your buck. My everyday palette is kind of like, it's a new palette. I got it in July, I think July. It's the Red Dragon and Judy palette from Oden's Eye. It is just a fantastic palette to use every single day. I love these tones. They make my eyes really pop because I have green eyes, so putting all of these like beautiful red tones on my eyes just make them pop. And there's like a little pinch of green in there to add a little bit of color if I feel like it, but for the most part, this is just my go-to everyday palette. It is stunningly beautiful. It makes me think of fall whenever I wear it and see it. It's beautiful, really fantastic. Judy did an amazing job with this. This is currently sold out and they're not bringing it back, so it is discontinued, but beautiful palette, really amazing, perfect for every day. Even if you're looking for a pop of color, this is just like the perfect amount of color for an everyday look. So my most colorful eyeshadow palette is a 4-way tie. Don't blame me. Don't come for me. I couldn't pick between these 4. Like, they're all like equally colorful, so I could not choose. The first of which being the Oden's Eye Alpha 2 palette. This is just like a pastel rainbow. It's super pretty. I really love this palette. I didn't expect to like it as much as I did, purely because it has 2 pressed glitters in it. And if you're not into pressed glitters, do know that there are 2 in here. I do not use them. I wish that they were not pressed glitters. I think in my opinion, it's the worst thing you can put in a palette because it's just an accident waiting to happen. But it is very colorful. It is very pretty. So this is one of 4 of my most colorful palettes. The second one being the Muse Beauty, or Kaleidos Beauty now, Impressionism palette. This is super pigmented. There are some neutrals in here, but it is incredibly pigmented. You got greens, you got blues, you got pink, you got red. There's just pretty much everything in here that you could possibly need to create a colorful look. You can see why this is one of my most colorful palettes. Next is the Kaleidos and Angelica Nyqvist Club Nebula palette. Also incredibly colorful. Also a lot of depth in here. You can really get a deep look out of this palette with a lot of different pops of color in here. The shimmers are to die for. The mattes just blend out beautifully. They're rich and deep and soft and creamy. This is an amazing palette and super, super colorful. And lastly, we have my grungy rainbow dream, the Amor y Mariposas from Melt Cosmetics. This is what she looks like. There is a row of neutral in here, but because it does cover pretty much the whole rainbow on the grunge side of things, this is also one of my most colorful palettes, as you can see. Next, we have my smallest palette. Now, it is a 6-pan palette. I don't have any quads at the moment. I did get the little Aquarius quad when Colourpop was having a sale, but it's not here yet. Supposedly it's out for delivery today. So at the point in time when I'm filming this, I don't have a quad. So 6-pan eyeshadow palettes are my smallest. I do have a lot of them, but I'm going with the actual like physically smallest palette that I have. And those are the Cosmetics Divine Skies eyeshadow palettes. These are tiny. They're little itty bitty pizzas of palettes. And why I say they're pizzas is because they're shaped like pizzas. They look like little pizza pans with little pizza slices as the eyeshadows. These are amazing. They're perfect for traveling. The shadows are a little bit fragile, so they're not like the best for traveling just because of how fragile they are, but the size is perfect. They're so little. And then I have Magic Hour in the back here. This is Faded Clementine. This is what the Magic Hour one looks like. This is like a really nice little everyday palette. I love this. I took it home with me for the holidays when I went to Vancouver, and it was just perfect. But yeah, really nice little teeny tiny little palettes. They are expensive for being as small as they are. I think they're like 40 Canadian, no, not 40 Canadian, 40 US dollars, which is a lot. That's a lot for such a small palette, but they do perform very well. The quality is fantastic. But yeah, really nice little palettes. My biggest palette in my collection is probably my Colourpop So Jaded palette. This is the collab that they did with Kathleen Lights. This is what the palette looks like. I had also considered this as a contender for my most colorful palette, but there's just too many neutrals in here for me to consider it like a super colorful palette. It is still super colorful. There's a lot of like deep jewel tones in here, but I figured to avoid repetition, it'd be best to just include this as my biggest palette because it is my biggest palette. There are 30 shades in here, including the pressed glitters. I don't use the pressed glitters, so in my opinion, there's more like 28 shades in here, but this is my biggest palette. And my palette with the best memory, there are 2 attached to this, and I spoke about them in the last video as well. These are the Frozen 2 Colourpop collaborations, and these are my best memory because they're some of the first palettes that I got in my collection. And I remember watching Mel Thompson's video about these 2 as one of the first videos that introduced me to kind of the YouTube beauty space. And it's one of the videos that inspired me to start my own channel. And that was all because of Mel and these 2 palettes. So this is probably my best memory. I miss Mel. Speaking of Mel, the palette that is worth the hype is the Sydney Grace and Mel Thompson Tiny Marbles palette. This is just phenomenal. It is so beautiful. I didn't expect to love this one as much as I did, but it is very versatile. There's a lot of like beautiful neutrals in here with pops of color. The duochromes in this palette are just amazing. There's a lot you can really do with this, and it really was worth the hype. The quality is through the roof. Uncomparable. Incomparable? Incomparable. Uncomparable. Yeah, it's just a beautiful palette. You really can't go wrong with this. I'm not sure when they're going to restock it again, but I know that the last restock I'm pretty sure sold out. But if you want to help out Mel's family by purchasing a palette, hopefully they'll bring this back in stock because it is 100% worth the hype. Okay, so the palette that's not worth the hype, please don't come for me. I got into this later than it released, I never got it when it released, so I missed the hype train, but I don't think it's worth the hype. This is the Modern Renaissance. It's really kind of boring. Like, I'm sorry, but it's really kind of boring. It's mostly mattes. Like, there's not, and the shimmers that are in here are really just lackluster. They're not that great. There's 2 pinky red shades that look exactly the same when you put them on the eyes. It's really just kind of meh. It really is just kind of a meh palette. It's not that great. It's really just not worth the hype, in my opinion. Don't come for me. Don't come for me. It might just be that I got into it too late. Maybe if I'd gotten it at the time that it was released, I would have loved it and it would have been my favorite thing ever. But as it is, it's just kind of boring. It's just kind of boring. There's a lot better things out there. Next is my favorite palette from a favorite brand. I'm gonna go with Oden's Eye. And I know in the previous video I said that my new favorite is the Alva 1, but that's not actually my favorite Oden's Eye palette. It is my new favorite of the palettes that I've gotten recently, and I just found out that I loved it as like a neutral palette too. But my favorite palette from Oden's Eye, at the moment, this could change on a whim, but my favorite is the Forest. This is part of the Alva 2 collection that came out, but these colors just remind me of The Legend of Zelda. It's so pretty. It's one of those palettes that you can create a look using every single one of these shades, and I have done in the past. It just brings me so much joy to look at. It really reminds me of a forest, like an old growth forest, with all the blues and the greens and the yellows and brown in here. It's just a really beautiful palette aesthetically, and it really encapsulates the theme that it was trying to go for, I think. So this is my favorite palette from one of my favorite brands, which is Oden's Eye. And lastly, we have my most used palettes. I had to go, because I tally up how many times I use every single one of my palettes, but it helps me keep track of how many times I use all of my palettes, so that way when I do my like yearly declutters, I can be like, okay, I don't really use this that much, so I can probably safely get rid of it. But my 2 most used palettes so far, neither of them are going to be a surprise. The Sailor Moon Colourpop palette, I've used this a lot, and also the Muerta palette. I've also experimented and used this one a lot. I've just had so much fun with it. These are also 2 palettes that I got earlier on in my palette collection journey, so it makes sense that these were the ones that I've used the most. This is obviously one of the ones that brings me the most joy in my collection because it's just so beautiful. The whole aesthetic of this palette is just to die for. Like, there's a reason that this one sold out like crazy and it's still in super high demand, because it is really just a work of art. It really is just a work of art. And this one is just cute. I just really like it. I had a lot of fun creating looks with this. The pop of yellow with the pinks and the purples is just, I love it. And there's just enough neutrals in here to create like everyday looks with this palette. It's just my childhood in a nutshell. And that is it for the eyeshadow palette tag number 1. I hope you liked this video. I hope it was insightful in some way. I had a lot of fun answering these questions or finding out which palettes were like on this list. So thank you very much for hanging out with me today. I hope you enjoyed this, and I will see you in the next video.